2 days before the wedding, my fiancé's dad called me. Meet me now. He showed me a video. My bride with another man same night. She said she was with her mom. 2 days before the wedding. I thought my life was a clean calendar page with neat boxes and tidy plans. The caterer had my final head count. The band confirmed the playlist. The venue manager texted about parking layout. And I kept a spreadsheet that looked like the dashboard of a small airline. My fiancée, Kara, had always loved a schedule. She built ours like a scaffolding where everything important could hang without wobbling. Her father, Armin, hovered at the edges of the planning with a quiet, appraising look. He respected order. He respected budgets. He respected the kind of partner who keeps promises with receipts. I worked hard to be that man. In the 2 weeks leading up to the big day, small changes crept in like hairline cracks in glass. Kara started missing calls during lunch. She frowned at her lock screen a moment longer than usual each evening. When I asked about errands, she mentioned gift bags and a seamstress visit and a bakery tasting that somehow ran late. I told myself that stress has a smell and it lingers on people who love perfection. I ignored the unease because the alternative was to admit that something rotten might be growing under our feet, and most people prefer a wobble to an abyss. Her father kept a measured distance from me, which I'd gotten used to over months. He never insulted me. He never hugged me. He treated me like a contractor who had bid well and delivered acceptable work. We met over budgets and service quotes and family seating, never over fishing trips or football. I took that distance as a test of consistency, and I accepted it. Then one evening, my phone lit up with his name. No prelude. No calendar invite. Just a call that groaned with tension. He said we needed to meet, and he named a cafe that kept long hours and very few customers at night. I assumed some last-minute expense had gone sideways. I expected him to slide a bill across the table and tell me to be a grown man and handle it. He looked different when I got there. He carried the tightness of bad news in his shoulders. His coffee sat untouched, and the spoon he had stirred with left a wet curve on the napkin like a half-moon. He didn't waste time with pleasantries. He said he had something to show me, and he wanted to say it in person because he hated gossip and he hated cowards. He told me he had followed his daughter the previous night after a call that did not add up. She had claimed she was staying with her mother to rework the veil and calm nerves. He was not convinced, which bothered him because suspicion is a kind of failure for a father who values control. He drove behind her with his dashcam running. He described a hotel on the edge of town that keeps privacy like a polite secret. Business travelers during the week, couples on weekend nights. He described a man waiting near the lot's back exit. He said he watched his daughter walk to that man and kiss him with the comfort of practice. He said he waited in his car and felt his stomach tighten like a fist he couldn't unclench. He slid his phone across the table. The screen showed stills from the dashcam feed. There was Kara in a coat I had bought for her on her birthday, moving like she knew the route. There was the man holding the door to the side entrance. There was the kiss that curved both faces into a shape I recognized from better times. The timestamp, the parking lines, the dim familiar glow of that hotel's signage. It all joined hands and formed a chain I could not break. I sat quiet, not because I had no words, but because the wrong words would turn me into a fool. Noise wastes leverage. A quiet head takes inventory. I asked him to send everything. He said he would not only send it, but also gather more if I wanted it. He said this without heat. He said it like a man who had decided that reality is a better tool than hope. I thought about all the confirmations on my phone, the prepaid vendors, the relatives who had rearranged flights and daycare schedules. I thought about Kara's rehearsed laughter at small hiccups, and the way she clung to plans like a climber to a rope. It felt absurd that a life can show two truths at once. A paper life that aligns and a secret life that rusts the bolts behind the wall. I did not stand up. I did not storm out. Anger is loud, and loud men often lose the room. I asked him whether he had confronted her. He shook his head. He wanted me to see first. He said she had been pampered into believing every mess could be polished into a narrative that would pass. He said he wanted this one to fail under the light. I left the cafe with my phone full of evidence and my face set to neutral. I passed a family eating late at a corner table, 2 kids crumpling straw wrappers, a mother checking a homework sheet, a father watching everyone with an easy patience I suddenly envied. The door closed behind me with the soft sigh that comes when a warm room lets you go. Outside, air felt sharper, as if the temperature had fallen while I was inside. It hadn't. I now lived in a colder version of the same night. At home, Kara slept on her side with one hand flung toward the empty space where I should have been. I watched her breathing settle into the even rhythm I had learned across a year of shared nights. A person asleep is honest in a way that cuts deep. I wanted to shake her awake and demand the version of events that would put me back together, but I counted instead. I counted drawers that held documents. I counted how many times she had said a specific phrase about being tired. I counted the remaining hours before the wedding week would lock our families into one path. Counting calmed me enough to make a plan. Plans are scaffolding. You climb them even when the building underneath is already burning. In the morning, I brewed coffee, kissed her forehead, and lied with deliberate ease about an early supplier call. She mumbled a reminder to confirm the limo service and rolled back under the blanket. I drove to the office and never went inside. Instead, I parked on a quiet street and opened her shared calendar, our cloud photos, and the location history that modern life leaves like footprints on wet sand. The last 2 months looked like a braided rope of routines and gaps. The gaps sat on repeating days. The dots stacked on 3 addresses that were not ours. The first address belonged to the hotel from the photos. The second was an apartment building with a narrow garage entrance and a habit of chewing fenders. The third was a small cafe near her office that shut its lights early but kept its back door propped for deliveries. The day still moved like a normal day. Trucks grumbled past. A bus sighed and lurched. Somewhere a car alarm chirped and went back to sleep. It made me feel like the world had no stake in my little disaster. That helped. Indifference is a good background for careful work. I texted Armin and asked for the dashcam files and whatever else he could add. He replied within minutes with a link and a half sentence that said he would keep pulling thread. He never added fluff. He treated information like lumber. Cut, stacked, labeled. By evening, my phone held multiple nights of footage that matched the pattern I had started to map. Kara's claims about errand runs lined up with the hotel entrance. The apartment address surfaced twice near dawn, the kind of hour where laundry rooms hum and delivery trucks claim the road. At one point, her figure appeared in the dashcam frame, crossing a sidewalk with hair pulled into a knot I recognized. She carried her heels in her hand like a secret. I did not tell her I knew. I did not tell anyone but Armin. A person who is confronted learns how to perform. A person who is unwatched reveals her full routine. I needed the routine. A clean break is easier to make when you understand every hinge. That night, I lay next to her again and watched the ceiling. Every wedding email that pinged my inbox felt like a stranger calling me by my nickname. The plan still ticked onward, but a different clock had started to count in my head, and it no longer pointed to vows. It pointed to an ending shaped with precision. I slept at dawn for an hour and woke with a strange calm. For the first time in weeks, I felt in control, and that feeling is a kind of oxygen. I would spend the next 48 hours not as a groom, but as a quiet accountant of truth. I intended to reach the rehearsal dinner with 2 things: proof the room could understand, and an exit that could not be blocked. That was the morning I stopped picturing a first dance and started picturing a route through a crowd. Information always lives in plain sight for those who know how to sort it. I stopped asking why and started asking where, when, and with whom. Motive rarely saves you. Pattern does. I traced Kara's repeating late nights back over 8 weeks. The pattern aligned so cleanly that even a sympathetic mind would stumble. Tuesdays and Thursdays showed the same dark windows on her timeline, and every other Saturday had that hotel's quiet glow stamped across it. She had explained those blocks as fittings, vendor checks, and helping her mother sort keepsakes. The map of her life told a different story. It read like a schedule carved by habit. Armin called at noon with a tone that made me sit straighter in my parked car. He said he had gone back to the hotel and spoken with a security manager he once helped during a licensing flare-up years ago. Favors owe memory. The manager confirmed multiple check-ins under Kara's first name and a shared alias for the other guest. Cash payments. No incident logs. No drama. I asked Armin to send me stills with timestamps that matched her calendar claims. He did. I filed them into a folder structured like a legal brief. A mess feels less like a mess when it sits in labeled rows. I returned to the apartment address. The garage door wore scratches like tally marks. The front buzzer listed names on paper strips. I watched a delivery van unload boxes of meal kits into a side alcove, and I took that moment to slip inside behind a man carrying laundry. I never walked the hall like a thief. I walked like a resident who had left something in his car. People see what you present when your pace is steady. On the 3rd floor, I found the door that matched the dashcam angle from Armin's files. A small brass plate held a surname I recognized from Kara's vendor list at work. His name was on a catering contract the company had renewed 3 months ago after she argued that a change would mess with the project timeline. I remembered the meeting because she came home proud of the approval. I had said well done. Now I stood outside his apartment and counted how many times I'd conflated confidence with certainty. I did not knock. I could not risk a scene that would muddy the final act. Instead, I took photos of the door and the hallway, then left. On my way out, I passed a woman pushing a stroller with a tired grace. She carried that look people wear when they have learned how to get through a day without becoming a public spectacle. I envied her competence. Back in the car, I called a friend who works in vehicle logistics and asked him to locate a plate number from Armin's footage. Favors required debts, so I offered one. He called back with a registered owner. The name matched the door plate. That settled the work connection. It also tied the hotel nights to a home base. From there, the steps became surgical. I called the florist and asked to review invoices, pretending to check a discount that had been promised in an earlier email. I didn't care about flowers. I wanted to see whether Kara had adjusted delivery times in ways that lined up with her absences. She had. The adjustments made sense for a bride avoiding rush hour. They also made sense for someone who needed a buffer between lies. I checked our joint account. The card spend looked normal, but the cash withdrawals had grown teeth. She had taken out several round amounts on dates that paired perfectly with those hotel visits. I noted each. I left the account alone to avoid tipping her off with a balance alert. I forwarded my deposit receipts to myself from a separate email, then began the quiet work of clawing back what could be recovered without triggering calls to her phone. I canceled 2 vendor add-ons that were in my name, called a tent rental company to pull an extra heater I had added on a whim, and paused a shuttle service that could be rebooked by anyone if the wedding somehow survived. I did not touch the venue deposit. Sunk cost is a lesson. I preferred to save my focus for the confrontation. Armin and I developed a rhythm. He fed me dashcam clips and a short, scalding commentary about how he had failed to teach his daughter that consequences exist without negotiation. He told me he would not yell at me or at her. He would state facts and step back. He thought restraint would cut deeper than noise. I agreed. 2 nights before the rehearsal dinner, I followed Kara without letting the act change my face. She said she needed to check a last-minute modification on the dress and would crash at her mother's house afterward. She left before sunset and drove a route I now knew by heart. I trailed her only long enough to watch her car slip into the hotel's back lot again. I didn't need more footage. I needed confirmation of the pattern in my bones. Watching it repeat set the resolve in a way files never do. I parked a block away and waited. Around midnight, a familiar sedan eased into the lot. I could map its dings from memory at this point. The man who stepped out wore the kind of casual sweater a man picks when he wants to look like he fell into a situation rather than built it brick by brick. He had that easy, thoughtless grace of someone accustomed to being forgiven. That detail made me feel sharper, not smaller. It meant he would never prepare for the kind of order Armin and I were building. I did not stay. Watching would rot whatever calm I had constructed. Instead, I went home, opened my laptop, and drafted a single-page outline of the rehearsal dinner. Not the seating plan. The sequence of truth. I listed what would be said and by whom. I listed which file would play first and which frame would end the denial. I left room for the silence that follows shock because people need a moment to rearrange their understanding before they will hear the next sentence. The outline read like a closing argument broken into steps. By morning, the playbook sat in my head. After coffee, I began to move through the house with a cold efficiency that startled me. I boxed my essentials quietly and labeled them with a number rather than a word. I took photos of the apartment in its current state because pictures anchor memory when people later argue about how something looked. I copied relevant messages to a folder and stored it on a small drive I could slip into my wallet. At lunch, a final piece slid into place from a direction I hadn't expected. The man's wife reached out. Her name was Daria, and she had read a text thread on a sync tablet at home that made her world tilt. She didn't start with accusation. She started with logistics, times, receipts, and a suspicion that her husband and my fiancé were using a shared chat to coordinate their afternoons. She had already forwarded herself copies before he could delete them. She said she wasn't calling to beg me to keep quiet. She wanted proof in a format that a court could digest, and she wanted to share what she had because fairness matters even when rage is clawing for space. I did not promise her anything. I didn't need to. She already had the same hunger for fact. We agreed on a simple exchange. She sent screenshots that matched my timeline, complete with location tags and photos cropped just wide enough to show Kara's code or a corner of the hotel lobby's distinctive rug. I sent her timestamps that would matter to a judge who accepts only the language of time and place. She thanked me for the precision and did not ask for reassurance. She sounded like a person who had already begun to plan her exit with the focus of someone packing a life at speed. That call hardened my path. Until then, a tiny corner of me had wondered if I could salvage something dignified from the wreck. Daria's evidence proved that mercy would be wasted on people who treat loyalty as a folding chair they can stash between meetings. I finished my cancellations and created a printed packet labeled with the rehearsal date. I slid in copies of the hotel stills, the apartment door plate, the deposit receipts, and a bullet point summary of the timeline. I made a second packet for Armin with a simpler layout and a separate note that told him, without flourish, that I would follow his lead in the room. The last thing I did that night was write a short paragraph addressed to the guests. It was not a speech. It was a strip of facts arranged so they could be read out loud without shaking. I kept it in my pocket and slept 6 hours with dreamless efficiency. It felt like an instrument had replaced my anxiety and began to play 3 steady notes. Gather, present, exit. The morning of the rehearsal arrived with a clear sky and an odd quiet. Kara hummed as she brushed her hair, and for a second, the normalcy almost seduced me into forgetting the folder in my jacket. Then she mentioned parking validation for the hotel where the bridal party planned to stay the night before the ceremony, and the word hotel hit the rim of my patience like a dropped coin. I smiled and put on my tie. She kissed my cheek and told me we were almost there. We were, just not where she thought there was. Rehearsal dinners usually feel like victory laps. Ours began with that same shimmer of accomplishment. The venue's smaller hall glowed with soft lighting that made everyone look kinder. The waitstaff moved with practiced grace. Laughter rose in pockets and drifted like a benign fog. Kara greeted relatives with an animation that would have fooled a panel of judges. She touched arms, checked on seating, and swung her attention from group to group like a light beam. I watched with a calm that surprised me. Nerves had burned off and left metal. I had one job: to let the truth speak and not let anyone drown it in noise. Armin sat 2 seats away from me at the head table. He and I had not exchanged a word since confirming our plan that morning. He used silence as a tool. He nodded once at me when the main course plates were cleared and the dessert forks clinked on the tablecloth. That was the signal. He tapped his glass with the back of his spoon, and the room sagged into a polite hush. He began in the measured cadence of a man who hates public scenes but hates fakery more. He said he had always believed in protecting family, and that protection sometimes requires telling the kind of truth that scalds. He said he respected me not because I was marrying his daughter, but because I met obligations without fanfare. He kept his eyes on the middle of the room, never pleading for mercy from anyone's face. Then he said the sentence that bent the night into a new shape. He stated clearly that his daughter was unfit to be a wife to the man at his side. He stated clearly that she had been with another man for months. He did not raise his voice. He did not point. He stepped back from the microphone and let the words sit. The room fractured along invisible lines. Some guests gasped. Others blinked hard as if their eyes needed a reset. Kara flinched and reached for his forearm as if proximity could rewrite facts, but he remained still. She began to protest, and even her protest sounded rehearsed. That made the next action land harder. Armin nodded at the venue manager, who dimmed the lights near the head table and brought up a small screen we had arranged with the staff that afternoon. The videos played. They were not lurid. They were competent. A car entering a familiar lot. 2 figures moving with an ease that comes from repetition. A timestamp marching forward without mercy. A still of a hallway, a door, and the back of a coat that appeared in too many of our engagement photos to be mistaken. The frame froze on the moment of the kiss captured by the dashcam's wide angle. No soundtrack. No captions. Just reality. The room stilled into that heavy quiet you get in hospitals and courtrooms. Kara tried to gather a narrative from the wreckage, but her sentences collided with the images and crumpled. No one heckled her. No one comforted her. The guests watched the screen the way people watch oncoming weather. I stood, not to grandstand, to end confusion. I thanked Armin for stating what had to be stated. I explained that this dinner would not continue as a rehearsal for vows that no longer had meaning. I told the room that I had already canceled what I could and that I would eat whatever loss remained. I said no one needed to speculate on my feelings because this was not a theater. It was a decision point. I kept my voice even. I did not use moral flourishes. People accept facts delivered cleanly. At that point, the next element of the plan unfolded. The other man, whose name did not need air, arrived at the venue, lured by a message I had sent from a dummy account offering a lucrative corporate tasting event that required his presence to finalize numbers. He walked in with a portfolio under his arm and the kind of stride a man uses when he expects to be valued. He saw the screen freeze framed on his own profile and stopped, as if an invisible rope had caught his chest. He tried to pivot. Men like him always try to turn a situation into a hallway they can duck down. He said the image could be anyone. The door plate from his apartment appeared next, and the registration details for his car followed. The dashcam footage cut to a morning clip that showed Kara leaving his building with the soft, unsteady steps of someone not expecting an audience. He shut his mouth and stared at the carpet because a patterned rug sometimes feels like a better narrative than a real one. From the back of the room, a voice spoke with a gravelly steadiness that cut cleanly through the air. Daria stood near the door, holding a manila folder close to her chest. She wore a simple jacket and the face of a person who has aged 3 years and 3 days, but refused to break in public. She told the room that she had her own copies of messages and receipts. She did not shout. She did not cry. She summarized. She did it the way a clerk recites a docket. She finished by stating that she had arranged for service of divorce papers and a request for temporary orders preserving assets, because planning well is its own revenge. The room absorbed that. If the night had been a soap bubble, it had popped. What remained was the damp reality of people sitting in borrowed chairs at round tables, suddenly stripped of ceremony. There were no good exit lines for Kara now. She tried one last pivot toward me, as if a softer version of the truth might still land. I said there would be no private talk to recast events. I confirmed calmly that the wedding was off and that she needed to arrange her own transportation to wherever she planned to sleep. I placed my packet on the table for the families and turned to go. Armin stepped into Kara's path without touching her. He told her with a level tone that she was on her own. He told her he would not fund her apartment, her car, or her boutique startup any longer. He said he had built a lifetime of assets by refusing to subsidize arrogance. He kept his words crisp and countable because countable words hold up when repeated later. No one clapped. This was not a movie. The staff kept working because the staff always keeps working. I walked toward the exit with the awareness that eyes were on my back, but I felt lighter with each step because the scene no longer required my presence. My job was complete. I had not screamed. I had not begged. I had not played wounded. I had presented a set of facts and walked through the door they opened. Outside, night air touched my face like a cold hand that wanted to steady it. I pulled my keys from my pocket and crossed the lot. Behind me, the rehearsal dinner continued like a machine winding down. A few guests came out early and stared at the sky as if it could offer a better story. It could not. The sky is indifferent. That is its gift. I drove home on a route that avoided the hotel district. I packed the last numbered boxes, loaded my car, and took photos of the cleared rooms. I left the key fob on the counter with a note for the property manager stating that a lease transfer request would arrive in the morning. I did not leave a note for Kara. Notes help people build myths. I preferred records. At a red light near the bridge, my phone buzzed with a message from Armin that said only, "Thank you for holding your ground." Under it, a message from Daria appeared with a scanned copy of a filing stamp. Her efficiency felt like a quiet hand extended across a long table. I nodded at the empty passenger seat. It felt like acknowledgement. The light turned green. The bridge opened over water that carried the city's tired reflections. I crossed with the sense that the next part of my life would begin at the far end without fanfare. That was fine. Quiet beginnings have better foundations than glossy ones. When the machinery of a wedding shuts down on the eve of the event, it does not clang to a halt. It whirs and clicks for hours as pieces wind out. The morning after the rehearsal, my inbox spoke in the language of confirmations and cancellations. The caterer processed the partial refund and apologized with professional sincerity. The band returned a portion of the fee and sent wishes with a tone that suggested they had seen worse. The florist kept the deposit and offered to donate the bouquets to a retirement home. I accepted that because waste offends me more than loss. I moved into a short-term rental with white walls and no history. The silence there felt clean. It did not ache. I forwarded my mail and changed my number. I sent a single message to my closest friends explaining that the wedding was canceled due to infidelity, that I would not entertain questions, and that kindness would look like leaving me space. People who care understand sentences like that. They don't ask for backstage passes. Kara tried to breach the boundary through every remaining path. She sent emails filled with vague words about mistakes and work stress piling up. She left voice messages from her mother's phone that spiraled into explanations about pressure and panic. She wrote a letter with careful pen strokes that tried to turn episodes into accidents. None of it changed the files on my drive, the footage on Armin's phone, or the posture of a room that had watched the truth play on a screen. I did not respond because response is nourishment. Starvation kills myths faster. Her family split along expected lines. A couple of aunts rotated the word humiliation like a jewel they needed to examine from all sides. They accused Armin of spectacle. They said a private correction would have done less damage to the family name. Others, quiet cousins who had learned the price of secrets in different contexts, told him in low tones that he had done the honest thing. And honesty is the only tool that still works when varnish peels. Families always divide between those who fear reputation and those who prefer reality. That is not unique to ours. Armin held his line with a steadiness that won me more respect than any toast he could have made. He did not rage in public. He did not badmouth in private. He closed accounts he funded and notified landlords he co-signed. He sent a factual email to the few vendors who had dealt with him directly. The wedding is canceled. No further charges will be honored. Please direct all questions to me. He CC'd me without commentary. I replied with a single sentence of acknowledgement. We conducted our cleanup like two managers shutting down a project that no longer met standards. Kara left the apartment we had shared after an exchange with the property manager that ended with a lease transfer to me for 30 days and then to a new tenant. She moved into a friend's spare room and spun a smaller circle. Mutual acquaintances reported that she alternated between defiance and collapse, which is a rhythm many people adopt when their own story stops persuading. I felt no victory in those updates. This was not triumph. This was simply the consequence of arithmetic catching up. The other man experienced an ending that calibrated itself with equal neatness. Daria filed her petition with the thoroughness she had promised. She attached exhibits that made ambiguity impossible. She requested temporary financial orders and the exclusive use of their home pending the division. She shared copies with me for the sake of completeness. She did not solicit sympathy. She did not perform courage. She documented. The judge approved her initial requests. He moved into a rental near a car wash and learned how to fold his own laundry and buy groceries without consulting a list someone else wrote. I know this because a mutual colleague mentioned it with a shrug a week later. Sometimes justice arrives not in prison stripes, but in small humiliations that last long enough to teach. A few guests tried to rehabilitate Kara's narrative in the group chats that had sprung up around the wedding. Screenshots surfaced with speeches about forgiveness and second chances and how stress can twist good people. I did not weigh in. Armin did once. He posted a single still from the rehearsal dinner video with the timestamp visible and said that forgiveness requires the person to be sober enough to ask for it without lies. He disabled comments on his post. The thread died a polite death. Work became my refuge. I buried hours in projects that had languished while wedding sat at the top of every list. Productivity steadied my hands. I did not overhaul my life or jet to an island or adopt a new persona. I did what decent people do after an explosion. I swept glass and filed claims and showed up where the calendar told me to show up. By the second week, my days no longer felt like tree-off. They felt like days. One afternoon, Daria stopped by my office with a plain envelope. Inside sat the final piece of paperwork that placed the affair in a frame no one could lift from a wall. She thanked me for giving her a timeline that a court could understand without a detective. She said she would not contact me again because a clean line between lives prevents entanglements, and she planned to keep her lines clean. I nodded. We shook hands. It felt like a formal close rather than a cinematic one. Those last longer. As for Kara, the most concrete consequence arrived from the person she had least expected to turn into an obstacle. Her father cut the cord with precision. He closed the business account he had funded for her boutique venture and transferred the balance to a charitable scholarship fund with a note about accountability. He notified her that he would not cover her car payment or her insurance after the current month. He returned a set of keys to her with the explanation that he would no longer be her backup plan. He loved his daughter. He also loved the idea that adults who break things should learn how to repair them without someone else's wallet. She called him a traitor in a message that leaked into a family chat. He did not respond. He forwarded her the number of a financial counselor and a link to a job site. He wrote a last sentence that read like a boundary rather than a confession. When you decide to speak plainly, my door will be open. Until then, build something under your own weight. In the months that followed, I occasionally crossed paths with people who had planned to attend the wedding. They treated me with the careful warmth one offers to someone who handled a disaster without making others sweep up after him. That felt like the right medal for what I had done. Not pity, not applause, just a nod that says, you kept your footing where most men fall. I did one last thing before I allowed the story to calcify into a fixed memory. I wrote a short letter and sealed it in an envelope I did not address. In the letter, I listed the decisions I had made that kept me from humiliating myself, saying nothing to Kara until the room was ready, sharing evidence only with people who needed to see it, and leaving when the job was done. I wrote it for future me. I wrote it because people forget how they held the line once their hands stopped shaking. I tucked the envelope in the back of a drawer. I expect to throw it out one day without reading it, which will mean I no longer need to remember the posture because it became the default. When I finally slept that first uninterrupted night in the rental, I woke with a sentence in my head that fit like a tool in a box. Her father lost a daughter the day he chose truth over comfort. I lost a liar the day I chose order over noise. We both walked away lighter, which is not joy and not vengeance. It is simply what happens when you drop what you were never meant to carry. I did not toast that thought. I did not tattoo it. I made coffee and got to work. The world does not pause for our sorrow or our good sense. It spins. We keep pace. Some days, that is enough. And that's the story. If you're still here, that means you're one of us. So go ahead, hit that subscribe button. I drop new chaos every single day, and trust me, tomorrow's story It's even worse than this one.